Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar about designing futures, how envisioning the future can help strategizing the present. My name is Roos Meijnen and I'm your host for this webinar. Before we start, it's good to know that all participants are automatically muted and the camera is off. You can ask questions via the question box in your screen and the questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. At the end of the webinar. Okay, let's go to the presentation and I'm pleased to give the floor to Pierre de Wit. Pierre, the floor is yours.
Yes, welcome. Hello, so my name is Pierre de Wit. I'm a digital strategy and innovation consultant at Quint. Today we will be presenting you design futures, and I will be doing this together with Luda and Justine. Maybe you can also introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Ludmila. You can all just Luda. I'm from Russia, currently residing in the Netherlands. I have a background in graphic design and interdisciplinary arts. And with these skills, I'm focusing on new ways of creative thinking and innovation.
Hi, my name is Justine Deude. I'm from Switzerland. I have a background in computer science and interdisciplinary arts. And together with Luda, we have been focusing on figuring tools and methods to design futures.
Check. Okay, so then a little bit about Quint. Quint is an international consultancy firm, a boutique firm, that focuses on digital strategy and transformation, not just designing, but also actually implementing the digital strategy with you. If we go to the next slide, so we have an approach which takes in general 5 steps to actually design and implement a digital transformation, which involves the 5 steps. So it's about the strategy and the vision, customer journey, designing the enterprise architecture, the business case and transformation plan, of course, and validating as soon as possible with proof of concepts. So over the last couple of months, the concept of new normal, which is pretty famous in innovation terms, has become a very generic concept. Everybody understands it, where in the past I needed to explain a lot. Nobody needs any imagination with that a new normal can exist and that it all of a sudden can happen. So how can you prepare yourself to this, and how can you include this into your vision? And this is where design future taps into, and it as part of our digital transformation steps, so to say. In step 1, that's where we define a vision. And if I look at design futures, this is also a way on how to actually give it a structured approach on how can you develop something like this. And with this, without spoiling too much about how we shape this as Quint, I would like to give the floor to Justine again.
Yes, thank you, Pierre. Okay, every time I change my cam, my screen goes away, so you will be stuck with my face until the end of this webinar. So to start, we're going to give you a little introduction to design futures. We're going to talk about why it is needed, especially right now. And we're going to talk about the framework and tools, as well as design futures in practice. And then we'll wrap up also answering questions. So to start, we would like to start with a poll, also to get to know you, our audience, a little bit better. So please answer with what fits the best to the question, are you already familiar with design future? Select one of the following. Yes, you're already using this in your organization. Yes, but you're not yet using it. No, but you've heard of it. Or no, you're not yet familiar to design futures. So we'll give you a few seconds to answer.
Yes, I see some answers coming in, so we give you a few seconds more. Because I still see some answers. Yes, I think this is okay. Thank you for answering. We're going to close the poll.
So the results are 12% said that yes, they're already using this in their organization. 0% isn't using it yet. 59% said no, but I've heard of it. and 29% said no, that they're not yet familiar to design futures. So for those 29%, and obviously for everybody else, we'll give you a little introduction to what is design futures. But before we go into the future, let's take a look back and look into the past. So in 1961, John F. Kennedy gave a speech to the nation where he said that he will commit himself and the nation to achieving the goal of, before the decade runs out, to land a man on the moon and returning safely to the Earth. At that time, this was only a dream because the technology was not advanced at a stage where this was possible yet. But with this speech, he basically committed himself and the nation to achieving this impossible. And as we all know, this impossible became possible, and a man stepped on the moon and came back safely to Earth. And the same story, even before that time, in 1770, Wolfgang von Kempelen built what is called an automaton chess player. So that would basically be an automated figure that you could play chess against. And Charles Babbage, a British mathematician, played against this automaton and lost twice. And although he believed that there must be some sort of trick to it, the thought that he could play against an automated machine is what led him to design the difference engine, or to design what is the precursor of the difference engine. And thanks to the difference engine, we have a calculator, which is also why we are now sitting in front of these computers and all of this technology works. But the funny story behind that is that this automaton chess player was not automated at all, and it was actually a tiny human being that was sitting inside the box and that would play the moves against the player. So what we see is that even if you think that impossible is possible, it will lead you to build new things. So if we look at different practices from more of an abstract perspective, you can say that a practice like art is very unconstrained, whilst a practice like strategy is more constrained. And so you would have design sitting somewhat in the middle. And then we have a speculative design, which is another form of design working on speculation, where you always ask questions like, what if? Within art, you also have the well-known science fiction, also dealing with fiction and speculation. You have strategic foresight, which is at the intersection of design and strategy. Also at the intersection of design and strategy, you have the well-known design thinking. And design futures lays somewhat in the middle. So it has elements of speculative design, it has elements of design thinking, and it has elements of foresight in it. So if we look at design futures in relation to design thinking, it's all about envisioning innovation based on different timelines. So design thinking, with the well-known 5 steps of empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test, is all about investigating the present and the immediate past. So it's about problem solving based on the current reality. It's about solving problems that you see right now, and solving problems because you need to have them solved right now. With design futures, when you work with design futures, you begin with the future in mind. So you work on a complete different timeline, and it's all about envisioning new possibilities and new opportunities. So if we look at why is design futures needed, well, first, it's all a question of time. So we spent most of our time working and thinking about the problems of today. Some of our time is spent on thinking about tomorrow, but the least amount of time is spent on the day after tomorrow. But if we look at it, working on today is what creates current value, and working on tomorrow is what creates future value, and actually focusing on the day after tomorrow is what creates long-term value. But the problem is even bigger than that. It's not only about us not focusing enough on generating long-term value and thinking about the day after tomorrow. The problem is also about basically the way we think. So as human beings, we think in a very linear way. We expect the future to be very similar to our present and to be a linear continuation of our present. But the thing is that the world doesn't work like that. There is a certain exponential growth factor that happens. If we look at technology, technology involves evolves in a very exponential way, and we actually end up in a place that we never really expected. So to give this into even more of a perspective, if you were to take 30 linear steps, so one step after the other, from where you're sitting right now, it will lead you maybe around the block, maybe to the very close grocery store, or just outside the apartment complex. But if you take 30 exponential steps, it will lead you around the world, not only one, but 26 times. And so even as I'm saying to you right now, to going around the world 26 times, I can't even grasp what that actually means. So we always, our human minds are just not made to think like that. And so we always end up being surprised by the unexpected or the unknown. So if I look at it even more, we can basically categorize what we know in different categories. So we have the known knowns, which are the things that we know that we know. We have the known unknowns, which are the things that we know that we don't know. And we have this big category of the unknown unknowns, which are things that we aren't even aware of that we don't know. So those are what people call black swans or wild cards. And it's this ever growing category of things that we never really expected, which, I mean, as we're seeing it right now, Corona is one of those unknown unknowns that we didn't expect. And so design future is all about tackling these unknown unknowns.
So how design future tackles these uncertainties and what it can offer you? Well, coming back to that story that we shared with you earlier with John Kennedy in his speech to go to the moon, he united the whole country in its entirety to commit to one ambitious, impossible goal. And he made it as a strategy. So just like that, designing futures make impossible as a strategy, the long-term perspective strategy, so that any project with a primary project or side project can contribute to that a big ambitious goal. Apart from that, design futures can also stretches the way you think. It stretches the way the thinking processes, and it helps you to think outside of what you used to, outside of the comfortable, to bring in new scenarios, possible and impossible scenarios. Apart from that, it's also design futures also helps you to bring to build resilience towards the uncertainties and different situations that you are unfamiliar with. Because the day after tomorrow will always obviously be uncertain, but with design future practices, it will help you to be prepared for that uncertainties and also to adapt quickly to them. Design futures obviously will not give you a crystal ball to look into and give you 100% certainty of what kind of future will definitely happen. That's why we call it design futures, not future, because in plural, because it offers you a multitude of possibilities, from the most possible probable ones to the most preposterous possibilities. And apart from that, it also goes a step further, and it helps you to strategize your present, your current now, and helps you to think how, in order to get to that future that you desire, what do you need to do right now? It seems that design futures can do so much, even though it's not that widely known. However, design future is a rising trend, especially now when Corona came into our lives and turned our lives upside down. It's being able to strategize the present becomes very essential and important. And the word future has become the word of 2020. All over the world, you can see a lot of initiatives and organizations trying to get more future forward and use some practices of future methodologies. And one of the examples is UNESCO. They set up future literacy as a skill of the 21st century, and they created so-called future literacy labs to explore how people imagine the future, envision the future, and also to educate them to be more future literate, to see what kind of practices they would use to envision the future. Another example could be that the future army force, they decided to hire science fiction writers to see what kind of scenarios of disruption they can come up. To also to use science fiction as a tool to come up with ideas that regular military strategists will not imagine otherwise. Also, you can see in the banking, in the innovation hubs of ING or UBS, you can see that they start using speculative design and future methodologies to envision the future and also innovate on the different level and scale. But let's get practical. What design futures as a framework entails. Based on the mentioned expertise of speculative design and strategic foresight and design thinking, we created a framework that consists of 3 parts: observe the future, orient to the future, and mapping the way to the future. In the first one, in observe the future, we focus on understanding the future already now, on trying to see what kind of little hints of the future we can already see now. We call them signals of change, and we learn how to work with them. In the next one, in the second one, we move from these signals towards scenarios. We learn how to make scenarios, and we try to set up a direction, what kind of future we want to move to. In the third one, we backcast the steps from that future, where we want to go to where we are right now, and what changes we need to make now to make that future happen. The framework we eventually translated into a workshop experience, and every part of that framework can be run as one individual workshop, and also the whole framework can be one workshop. We plan to facilitate these workshops offline, but Corona changed our plans and we had to adapt, and we made our workshops digitally using such tools as Miro and Google Hangouts and other tools as our canvas and meeting room at the same time to embrace creativity within the given circumstances. So we use different tools, methods, and strategies that we've developed to define the scope of the research, then to see what kind of other areas and fields influence this research. Then we go on a hunt for signals of change. Then we cluster these signals. Then we see what are the driving forces hidden in all of these signals. Then we move towards scenarios. Then we create these different scenarios to see what kind of future we want to go, and also what kind of future we do not want to go. And from that direction, we also back up steps to where we are right now to see what kind of changes on what kind of level we need to make on a human level, on the organizational department level. Yeah. One of our recent examples of applying design futures was exploring the house of the future together with the housing corporation. They were looking into the ways how to build an image of what the house of the future might look like. And instead of using these buzzing words as hyperconnectivity or digitalization or anything else that might pop up as a leading trend, they had developed a more global understanding of what house of the future might look exactly specifically for them as an organization. Also, they developed an understanding of what the future might entail. And also they have understood how that on a personal level, how the whole envision of that future might be relevant to their work right now. But this is obviously just an example of the future of applying design futures in the area of housing, but it can also be applied in any other field, if it's fashion, healthcare, transport, you name it.
So this is it for our part of the webinar. I'd like to invite Pierre back to talk a bit about designing futures with Quint.
Yes. Well, so we're a bit ahead of schedule, but so we introduced you like where it comes from, the relevance, why it's needed, and how you can actually use it. Apart from that, and this is also comparable with methodologies that we're using a lot for our transformation work, like design thinking. We would like to offer people and allow them to actually get more feeling of like, what are we actually talking about? What are the techniques? What are the tools that we are using? And we offer this in 2 variants. One is a boot camp where you actually get to work on what the design futures entails. So it's a 2 to 4 hour workshop. We actually even facilitated this internally and online. So I was surprised not to see my own picture busy in a session. But we can also facilitate this online or face-to-face, but it's a bit depending on the situation, of course. And apart from that, and the bootcamp is especially focused on getting more acquainted to what are the techniques and how can you actually use it. So yes, you can bring a topic, you can bring a theme that is interesting for you or relevant for your strategy and your organization. But it's more about understanding the methodology better. We can also offer and facilitate workshops, and here you have to think of in between half or 2 day workshops, and that depends a bit on how you want to set it up. And in this workshop, the content is actually a core and focus of what we're going to deliver. So more in depth with a focus on the end result of a design future workshop. I think, yeah, from my side, this is it, what we wanted to share on design futures. I think if there is any time, and I guess there's a lot of time for questions. Are there any questions?
Yes, thank you guys. Yes, there are questions. Let me see. When should design future be used and when not? Who can answer that?
Well, design futures works with a long-term perspective. It works with imagination. So you set up a certain you set up an imaginative possibility of what might happen in the future, and you set up any kind of long-term perspective. You can set up a half a year, from half a year to 100 years. It's up to you, but it works with a what-if situation. You start thinking, projecting, testing, simulating yourself in that future to also see, do you like this future? Do you not like this future? Is it appealing to you? Is it not? So in that sense, it will work when it comes to something. What if I want to think of what might happen in the future? I want to test what is it out there that I haven't explored. In that sense, it's very different from, let's say, design thinking, because design thinking solves the problem of the status quo problem, the problem of today. And design futures doesn't deal with the immediate responses, with the changes that need immediate reaction. It might give you a hint of what is important to pay attention right now or in the future. It might give you a little understanding of what changes you need to make right now in your organization or in your environment, or maybe what kind of skills you might start to picking up, but it will not give you the immediate reaction, immediate change. That's what it's mainly used for and not used for.
Great, thank you. I have another question. Can you make sure that the future you design becomes reality?
Yeah. So the thing is with design futures, it's not a crystal ball that will tell you this is exactly how the future, what kind of future is going to happen. And I think besides that octopus that back in 2010 predicted what football matches were going to happen, who was going to win, nobody else would dare to say that they can predict what is going to happen. So the idea of design futures is basically that you set up a vision of what will happen, and you don't set up only one, but you set up a multitude of possibilities. So it helps you to be more resilient and to be more prepared to basically create some future readiness for like whatever might happen. And so if we look at it right now, digitization is a big topic. We're all in front of our computers doing home office. Security is an issue. All of these things that we didn't think of before are now becoming part of our present. But if we look at it from a more of a long-term perspective, in 5 years from now, for example, people will have worked from home for a long time already, and they might be fed up, and they might be deciding that it's time to completely change the way we work once again. So the idea is not to pinpoint that this is the future that I want, this is the future that should happen, and we will do everything we can to get there. The idea is more to have a global understanding of those are all the possibilities that are lying out there, and these possibilities basically update as time passes. And so the future we see now is going to be a completely different future than the future we see 5 years from now, and it will change with time. So the idea is that you get ready for whatever future might come.
Great, thank you, Justine. I have yet another question about the workshops. Are you giving these workshops also for stakeholder groups? Maybe Pierre, you can answer that.
What's meant by that? For one specific client or for a set of clients?
Good question.
So
I'm not sure.
If I look at if I look at the setup or how we offer it now, it's always open to discussion, of course. But the boot camps generally, we invite multiple clients from different sectors to actually to experience it. If you're talking about setting up a workshop for a specific organization, it makes sense to and have an in-depth view. Then it makes sense to just do it for one client. I would, however, make sure that the diversity in these workshops is broad, because you to include multiple disciplines, because it also affects the whole organization if this is meant with stakeholders.
Thank you. Well, if it's not, then she will ask another question, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, I've yet another question, because we still have some time. Are there real life examples of results that are created with this kind of approach? Are these enterprises using it structural?
Sorry, can you repeat the end of the sentence?
Are there enterprises using it structural? Sorry, where am I?
Okay, yeah, so I can talk again about the example of the Swiss bank. So they have set up a whole department that is a little bit outside of the bank itself, so that you can there's still space for creativity, but they invite people every 6 months. They have a rotation of young designers and people from also anthropology and sociology to come and get together to think about the future. And so what they use it for is to is part of the wealth management department. So they create basically visions of what this future could be like. And it goes very, very further than 5 or 10 years. They start with 2070 as a minimum. And so once they have this vision, this will then help the wealth management department to decide on where their investment should be going. And so they have, for example, also worked a lot with the idea of digital currency. So this is one of the examples where design futures is applied. And obviously design futures can come under different umbrella topics. So it's we call it design futures. Some people call it strategic foresight. Some people call it futuring. And also a lot of people call it speculative design. So it's also sometimes a matter of how people call it. But yeah, this is one of the examples.
Okay, great, thank you, thank you. Let's do one last question. Do you expect design futures to replace the more traditional strategic processes, like a new normal to help organizations or policy making? Are the existing strategy models broken, you think?
I can say that, in my opinion, I think design futures or like future thinking should be something that included on our honestly high school education. I think thinking about the future, as Justine mentioned, that the day after tomorrow brings the most value, is essential for you to think about the future, because when next time pandemic happens or anything like that happens, then I'm resilient towards any kind of change. I know what might happen. I think it will probably not, but it also doesn't need to replace any strategic policy making practices that already exist on the market. It might be included in one of the processes. It might include in one of the cycles of ideating of like, okay, we have this setup of what the situation might be implemented, of how the problem might be solved, but let's think of what this same problem might happen in 10 years or in 5 years or in whatever. And the practice of, let's say, understanding what's happening in the world and trying to understand the signals of change or the little signals of the future that you can find already now is helpful, just to get an understanding of what is happening outside of the world, what you need to pay attention to. So I think that this definitely shouldn't replace, but it should be included so that everyone can think of that, everyone can be flexible, adaptable, and resilient.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we can leave it at this. I want to thank Justine, Mia, and Pierre, of course, for your presentation, and of course, everybody who listened and joined the webinar. If you want to know more, or if you still have questions, please contact Pierre or Wouter. We will not share the slides, but the webinar is recorded, so please check out our YouTube channel if you want to watch it again. And if you are interested, please go to our website for new webinars, because there are a few more planned the coming weeks. Okay, last question. If I close the webinar, there will appear a survey where you can provide your feedback about this webinar, because we would like to know what what you think of the webinar. And well, thank you, and thank you again, and have a good day. Hopefully till next time.